Commence primary ignition.
I'm just not the hero type, clearly.
What a piece of junk.
Enterprise, this is the captain.
I got a bad feeling about this.
It's all part of the plan.
Engage.
Welcome back to Podcast 2 for 1. I'm your host, Donovan Thompson, with my co-host,
Daniel Wingfield.
And today we have a very, very special guest, Arkansas native Jess Carson.
Hello, everyone.
And if you don't know, Jess, again, Arkansas native, went to UCA, and now she is writing on The Flash.
Yep. I actually went to UALR.
UALR, I'm sorry.
UALR, yeah.
Oh my God, Donovan,
already
that is so
watching.
unprofessional. I am
There you go.
embarrassed.
That's so professional.
I want
There you
to
go.
apologize for both of us for that.
That's good. I actually bounced around a little, so it's fine. I was at U of A first, and then ended up at UALR. So
Gotcha.
Where did you go to
Okay.
high school?
I went to Joe T. Robinson,
Oh, cool. Awesome. What year did you graduate high school?
2006.
Okay. I was 3 years behind you in LR, North Little Rock.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And real quick, all our fancy plugs. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, that notification bell. That way to update on all future episodes of Podcast 2 for 1, as well as the cool content we have at 2 for 1 Studios. And of course, we are brought to you by Kapow Comics, located in Sherwood, Arkansas, at 4047 East Kill Avenue. They have comics, collectibles, graphic novels. They even have special guest appearances throughout the year. I know in September, David Yost, the original Blue Ranger, will be there from Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. So go check him out. He's really cool, and I'm sure he'll sign all kinds of crazy cool things for you. All right, Jess, I'm so glad you're on the show again. I just talked to you a few seconds ago. I'm a huge fan of The Flash, and again, as much as I want to ask all these fan-centric questions I have, I'm going to contain my excitement, and I really want to dive deep into how you got to become a writer. Was that your initial passion, and just kind of that trajectory there? So let's start out here. What got you into filmmaking and writing in general?
Well, it's actually really interesting. I grew up just a really energetic, precocious child, undiagnosed ADHD, those types of things. And I do remember, when I was able to start like focusing in school and everything, I spent so much time really just making sure I was being a good kid at school and doing my best. And all of that excess energy came out on my poor parents. But I do remember there was a time where I had gotten in trouble for something, and I can't remember what it was.
Sure you can't.
Yeah, of course not. Yeah. And so mine, because I was so like into things like, I did like video games and, going outside and everything, but I also like was learning how to play piano, and I loved how to do things on my computer. So like those are the things that my parents would take away from me when I got in trouble.
Right.
So they made me write an apology letter, and me being the dummy that I am, I wrote this like story about this princess who's like stuck with her evil parents. And then because I obviously have a death wish, I gave it to my parents.
There you go.
And they ended up being, they thought it was the most amusing thing ever, and started putting me in like creative classes. And so
Wow.
I started doing like creative things pretty young. And at first, when I went to college, hilariously enough, I actually went to college for music education. Because it's like, it's Arkansas. So there's a lot of times where the parents are traditional, and they're like, you need to get a stable job and go be a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And that didn't work out. So ended up needing to transfer back home, and then transferred to ULR. And I decided, you know what, clean slate here. I was actually working for the college on the other end at that point, and, was getting 90% off tuition. And I said, you know what, like college is almost paid for. I might as well major in something I want to major in. So naturally I changed from something that would make me money to something that would make me nothing, which was creative writing, English creative writing, with no emphasis on education. So it was just English and creative writing. And that went over well. But anyway, I was in fiction writing for a while. So it was like, I'm going to write the next best, sci-fi or period piece or something novel. And there was a short story that I had that I gotten a pretty bad grade on. Shout out to David Yost. And I remember him specifically saying, this reads like a shorts. This reads like a movie, not a short story. And I was like, oh, okay. And this was, 2011, maybe 2012. And, as you guys know, it took until UCA kind of created it for Little Rock to have any kind of film school. So I had some friends over in the comms department at UALR, and I said, hey guys, I looked on the internet about how to write a movie script and I want to do it. And they're like, okay, we have cameras. And I was like, great, that's how you do it, right? And then I made this short film that is the most atrocious thing that I've ever made. And no one can find it on the internet but me.
What's the name of it?
We all have those. We all have those. We all have a closet of short films.
Exactly.
No one will ever see. Yeah.
Not the light of day. It was called 7 Hours. A good friend of, he's now a good friend of mine. I'd met one of my really good friends on that named Sean Jones. He's an actor. He's actually out here now.
Sean Jones. I know Sean.
Yeah, Sean Jones.
His mom was a teacher at North Little Rock. And he would come down all the time for like our drama classes to do like workshops with us. Great guy.
Yeah. He's a filmmaker and an actor now, and he's out here. He actually just moved back to Los Angeles. He had a stint in New York City. But we did the movie, and I love the process. And I was like, I'm a tinkerer. I've always been a tinkerer. Like if I'm learning something, I want to know everything I possibly can about it. So I was like, I like doing this. I need to learn how to do it. So I was working full time, but I did want to do grad school and I wanted to do something film related. So I ended up doing the remote MFA for screenwriting at Full Sail, and which was, it was good. And I really got a lot of those skills and got a lot of resources and things of that nature. And then I made another short film called Paradigm. And then, that was better than the first one. And then
it's got
I made
Kyle Wigington and Mindy Van
Kuren in it. Yeah.
Oh, Mindy Van Kuren. Yeah.
Good old Mindy. That's my big sis
Mm-hmm.
right there. That's my big sis right there. So, and then I did another one called 72 Seconds. Again, that had Kyle in it because it was like, that was a short notice film. I was like, I really like the script and I really want to do it. And then once I'd kind of seen, okay, I feel like I'm kind of getting somewhere here. Naturally, I wanted to go somewhere that I was the absolute smallest fish in the absolute biggest pond. That was my next step because, it's always been my mentality is the lower you are on the totem pole, quote unquote, the further you have that you can reach, like the biggest goal you can to reach. And there's always going to be someone to learn from. So I started applying to day jobs. I was doing digital marketing at that point, and that was 2014-ish. And so I started applying to digital marketing jobs in every major film hub I could think of. So Albuquerque, New York, LA, New Orleans. And I said, whoever bites first, that's where I'm moving. And I ended up getting a job in New York City. So I left in 2015. Started taking some workshops and trying to meet people in the industry and things of that nature. I had a really good friend named Christy Hall, she had gone to U of A Fayetteville, and she had been living in New York, acting and everything. So she helped me get plugged into a lot of people. And then, by way of things, I ended up landing a script writing job for an off-Broadway musical called Only Human. It starred Gary Busey. Don't think I'm drunk enough to talk about that, but it happened. It was a thing. I got the credit. It was great. The composer is now one of my lifelong friends, but that process really was something. So after that happened, in that process, because it was theater, the development of it took about 4 years. So around that first year mark, I ended up landing a manager at Echo Lake, and at this point I have two, but Keegan is my main guy. And we started talking about, after I got this off-Broadway credit, okay, how do we want to try to get into things? Because the goal for when I become all successful and I can do whatever I want, it's going to be to write and direct features and to create television shows. That's what I want to do. So, the good thing about my manager in particular is like, he takes that and he takes what I do and he's like, let's find a strategy for that. And with having done a couple of shorts and, one or two that did have some traction and everything, he said, the feature area is probably not going to be as hard as we think. The television area will be, because you have no experience in it. So let's think about maybe trying to work in TV. And so once that was like, yeah, that's a good idea, I knew I had to move to LA because still, even after the pandemic with a lot of remote things, no matter where something shoots, 99% of the rooms are going to be in Los Angeles. So
Right.
I moved to LA like a week after Christmas of 2018. So basically in 2019. And then we went on my first year. I basically, did what we like to call in industry the water bottle tour. And that's where you're out, you're meeting execs, you're getting in their Rolodexes. They call it the water bottle tour because I don't even know if it's more superstition or if it's actually like the courtesy, but I feel like it's more superstition that, you're always going to get asked, when you're waiting, would you like some water? Please take a water bottle. That's like, take your water bottle. Yeah. So yeah, met a whole bunch of execs from all over the place. We just started kind of building that and getting my writing out there, getting my names, in their brains. So did that for about 6-7 months. And then towards the end there, I had actually started meeting with networks particularly. And then I went and I met with the CW. And then I met with Berlanti Studios. Actually, I had 2 meetings at the CW because a lot of networks, they like to keep a pool of approved writers, like if they're going to be bringing people in. So great move, obviously for my manager to be like, let's get in there and make them love you. And then there was a freelance episode available for The Flash. And I went through that process. Obviously, it was already, approved by the CW. So then I got to meet Eric Wallace, the showrunner. We had some conversations. And ended up landing that freelance episode as episode 6 or season 6, episode 18, Pay the Piper, Pied Piper last season, Pied Piper and Godspeed is what we had last season. That was my first foray into it. And then we were hoping to get the job and maybe get a script coordinator job or get an assistant job or whatever, but ended up getting a call in February that they wanted to hire me on for season 7. Yeah, here I am.
That's pretty awesome. That's a great little rundown there. I guess, I mean, obviously I have 1,000 questions, but one of the first ones I want to ask is something that really, 2 things. First thing I want to ask is, you started meeting with all these different places. Were these just like casual meetings in terms of just kind of figuring out who you are and what kind of person you are and just that kind of thing? Or was it also you had samples with you? They'd seen samples previously before you walked in. How did that, you say get on the Rolodex, like, what do you mean by that?
Yeah. So it was a bit of a mix of both. When you're repped, it makes those meetings a lot better because,
right.
They read your script beforehand, and it really depends on what. So I have, a few TV pilots in my portfolio, and I also have a few features in my portfolio. So, if I'm going to meet with like, a film studio, obviously they're going to read my film sample. TV network, they're going to read my television sample, and it's usually tailored to execs who are in the vein of what I do. Like I wouldn't go and meet with like, an ABC person because I don't really write straight up dramas. Like, what I mean? I'm not like,
right.
I wouldn't go meet with like Comedy Central because comedy's not really my wheelhouse, that kind of thing. So they've usually already read you by the time you get into the room, and it's really all about, because, I tell people all the time, like, this industry is 90% relationships, 10% talent. And that's what these meetings are for these execs to kind of figure, and for you. And I think that's also something people don't really think about. I'm like, yes, it's definitely for these execs to figure out if they want to work with you, but like, we as artists should also like not work with people we don't want to work with, because it really makes
for sure
life really hard. Guarantee it. And so yeah, it's really about feeling each other out and talking about what you do and what you want to do. But I did have certain meetings because, again, I have a feature in development. Well, I have a few features in development now, but like at the time I had a feature in development, and it's also talking to like these production companies. When we go talk to a production company, for example, if they produce stuff like this, it's kind of a hybrid meeting because it's still very general, still getting to know each other. However, they've read the sample and they obviously like it. So it's really kind of that, it's a hybrid of general, but also simpatico to see if maybe we want to put our names behind this movie kind of thing. So, usually, with a general meeting, the main point is to get to know each other and see if there can be or will be a working relationship down the line, because Also, a lot of these production companies for like features, they have what are called OWAs, open writing assignments. And if they know you, that's what I mean by like the Rolodex. If like they have an OWA come across the desk, they're like, oh, this would be great for someone like Jess Carson. Let me reach out to her manager, kind of thing, you know? So that's, you definitely want to make sure to do as much of that as possible.
Now, you said one thing that, and I could be just making an assumption here, so correct me if I'm wrong. You said that in your samples for television and for your samples for screenwriting, you have a couple in there that you give to whoever to read beforehand. I can only assume, and I hear some people already listening to this going, oh, I only have to write like 2 television scripts and 2 feature scripts. I assume these are the 2 best out of probably 10 to 20 per thing. Is that true to say that?
I'd probably say it's the most fitting. So it's the most fitting for who you're, you know, if I'm going to go talk to like Agbo, the company behind Extraction, I'm not going to give them a drama paced period piece to read, right? Because that's not kind of, and that's kind of the big onus on us as artists too. I think a lot of times there's just so much like, I'm an artist, I am an artiste, which yes, we are definitely artistes, but we're business. We are a business. And so it's also up to do that due diligence for when those meetings are set. Go research, see the type of stuff they produce, see what they have coming up. Because if you ask them what they're doing, if you have that interest there, then they're like, oh, okay. You know, you may get to talking and realize you're a really great fit on something. I got an adaptation gig right now, and I got that off of a meeting about something else.
Right.
Talking about something else. But I had done the research and I asked the question in the meeting, of course, like, hey, what are you guys like? What else are you guys working on? Tell me a bit more about your company. And then like there was one project that I was like really dope about, and they were like, yeah, we're having a hard time cracking this. And we just ended up kind of like creatively chatting, and then a gig came out of it. So it's like definitely making sure we're treating ourselves like businesses and doing our due diligence and researching who we're talking to is super, super important.
Well, I know one thing.
I probably have like 10 or 11 scripts. I'd probably say about 5 and 5 in my portfolio. I'm always writing, always creating something new.
I know one thing that even Daniel can attest to is that when we both interned out in LA, we were doing the whole, script coverage thing, right? You brought up the water thing. That was like every time someone come in, you want a Pellegrino or you want a bottle of water? That was what I had to ask them. But yes, we had writers, and I know me and Daniel has talked about this in the past, but writers come in or we're reading all their scripts, and it's like, this isn't, exactly what this company does, but they're a really good writer, and we're going to kind of log that in our little logbook, right? That's something we run into all the time. And sometimes like, man, this is perfect. Like I think out of like all the 40, 50 scripts I read, like 2 of them maybe was good for the company. Like I could see them producing this, but maybe 10 or 15 out of those 40 or 50 were really good writers. And I was like, hey, you guys should maybe reach out to them.
Yeah. And then like really studying the craft, right? Because, I think a lot of early writers don't understand when we're like, hey, they write things that are in the vein of X, Y, and Z. That doesn't necessarily, so take Flash, for example, saying, oh, it's the Flash, right? It doesn't necessarily mean your sample has to be a superhero sample. Mine was like this post-apocalyptic thriller. However, at the core was this very core ensemble. And the ensemble, the way the ensemble played off of each other is the way they approach it in the Flash. So in a sense, those are in the same vein. So it's like, that's why it's also really important to watch a lot of TV, watch a lot of films, do all of that, learn the craft from that way. Because when you think about it in those types of terms, your scripts probably fit way more things than you actually think they do.
Right. No, that's
awesome.
I've
got a question real quick, if you don't mind. So when you got the Flash gig, had you watched the Flash up to that point?
Oh yeah, I personally,
Okay.
I'm a huge, I mean, you see me sitting here in this gamer chair, like I'm a huge
right.
And
okay, cool.
I'd been keeping up with the Flash since season, I think 2 is when I started watching it, and then I went back and watched 1, and I've been with it ever since. Yeah, huge fan of the show.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to ask you mentioned the phrase freelance episode in terms of the Flash was looking to fill in a writer for that. Like it's one thing actually I've never really heard of before. So can you talk a little bit about what that means, and is that something that they have like 1 or 2 slots open a year for an episode, or they maybe like explain how that happened and what that means?
Yeah, it's actually a bit of an enigma. It's not necessarily something that's like super common all the time. it was like right place, right time, which is the other. that's the 10. The thing that makes it the 110% about this industry is that a lot of it is just right time, right place, right time. In this particular case, because I know every show does it differently, but in this particular case, I know now, hindsight being 2020, that they had a staff writing position coming open. And this was Eric's way of being like, I can really kind of test out not only because the person can write when you meet with them because you've already read them when you meet with them. Right. But the thing about a writer's room is that it's so collaborative. And so you actually have to really mesh with the people that you'd be working with. So for Eric, it's like, oh, great opportunity for me to figure that out by having a freelance episode, because on the freelance episode, I did go to the writer's room for a few weeks while we were breaking the episode. And so, not only me, but him and everyone else in the room, we got to really see like, am I a good fit for the room? And am I a good fit for the pace that this show goes? So, you go in and you basically, you're working in the room for, a few weeks and do the episode as normal. And then you're done. And, I'm kind of the type of person, because like volume all the time, I can't like sit and dwell on things. So it was honestly out of sight, out of mind after I left the room, because it's like, okay, this is over now. Next thing, blah, 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 and then I halfway forgotten about the fact that they had a position open when we got the call. So that was a really pleasant surprise, because it was like at that point in time, I had 3 managers, and all 3 of my managers like were on a conference call, and they called me, and I'm like, this is either gonna be really good or really bad. I don't know why all 3 of them are getting on the phone with me right now, but yeah. So it works a little different depending on the show.
What can you kind of walk us through what an episode look like, what an episode, creating an episode in the writer's room looks like? You said it was a couple weeks, right? So one episode is several weeks in the writer's room. What does that look like kind of day to day?
Yeah. So, and even that depends. So like, for example, last year in the room, we probably got, I don't know, like a week or so to kind of come up with our first drafts, just because we started production late because of COVID. So the room started late and everything was very much condensed. But so the way you do it, let's say beginning of the season, we come in, and actually the first 3 to 4 weeks, maybe more, depending on the show that you're on, you're actually kind of talking big picture for the season. Hey, here are the big things that we'd like to see. These would be some cool things to happen. That's awesome. That's great. And then it's like it's like a funnel, essentially. So we start at the top of that funnel. Everything's really big and broad. We have the things that we like. And when you're in a physical writer's room, like you actually have like them on sticky notes on boards. And then once you get past that process, we're narrowing the funnel down. Now we take each of those pieces and we're like, ooh, this is definitely something that's like finale material, or this is like, oh, a great mid-season type thing, or this should happen kind of then. And then you're starting to get like the bones of what the season looks like. And then you go down even further until we start to kind of figure out, all right, here's the big thing that's going to happen in episode 1 or episode 2 or episode 3. And once we kind of have that together, and that usually takes somewhere between 3 to 6 weeks, depending on the show and depending on how much time you have, then you start doing what's called breaking an episode. And so once we have that, we kind of know how the season's going to go. We know everything is going to happen from point A to Z. Then we're going to take those little notes we have for episode 1, and we start outlining episode 1 as a room. So we do what's called blue skying at first. And we talk in big pictures about the general flow of the episode. What do we think should happen? Yada, yada. And then we start doing what's called a short board. And again, these are all like actual boards in our room. And that's why I'm like using my hands a lot, because I'm like, short board. And then we start like, it's almost like, how when you're doing an outline for like an essay in high school and you've got like your A and then you're like sub points. We do that with an episode. So for Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, Act 4, Act 5, Act 6. And we plot out each of the main points in each act of the episode. 1 to 2 sentences, a lot of times not even full sentences. That's like the short board. Then we take that and we go to what's called the long board. That's when we take all these plots and we go into more detail. And so now we're actually doing beats for each scene in every act. And this is like the more like you look at it and you can see the whole, show without having gone to script yet. Then we have to get that approved by the showrunner. Right. So he'll come in, he'll look at it. He comes in like, Eric's pretty hands-on when he can be. He's busy as heck, but he's pretty hands-on when he can be. So he'll come in and, he'll read the longboard, ask any questions he has, makes his comments, makes his notes. And then from that longboard, which is basically an outline of the episode, the writer or writers, the Flash writes in pairs. So the 2 writers for the Flash will then go off and start to write the episode. While those 2 writers are out of the room, the rest of the room starts breaking the next episode. Gotcha. So it's like usually kind of an overflow of things. And then so those 2 writers might be out of the room anywhere from like a week to a week and a half while they're writing the script. We get that first draft to the showrunner. While he's making his notes, we go back in the room and kind of help where we can. But then when we get our notes back, we'll come in and do our rewrites. And then it goes to the network, the studio for approval. And then it goes to the network for approval. And then once all of that is taken care of, then it goes to the production team.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So do you go on set at all with the scripts you personally wrote?
Yeah, normally, yes. Did not get to last year, which sucked because first year I would have been able to go to Vancouver, but because of COVID, they weren't literally not letting anyone but the cast. And when the cast went up to Vancouver, they had to stay. So they couldn't come back home. So they were up there for 9 months. But usually, yeah, you kind of go up and you serve as a script supervisor. Just so one to 2, usually just one of the writers do. We have a very, very generous and wonderful upper level staff. So if it had been a normal year of, for example, my first episode this season, Sam would have been like, yeah, Jess, you go, because he's just awesome. So yeah. So usually, we go to set. I think what they ended up doing this year was live set feeds that you kind of watched as they were going instead. And you were able to text, the production team and everything while they were in Vancouver, if there was anything wrong or whatever, so, but normally, you get to go to set and kind of script supervise.
I know typically, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like at least the difference between features and television in terms of writing. Features, it seems like the directors and producers, they have, let's say, more power, more say in the matter. And then in television, it's kind of flipped, where the writers typically have at least more say involved. Is that in terms of being on set, I should say?
Yeah. I would actually say it really depends for both, for film and TV. I'm pretty when it comes to for example, when it comes to features, I'm pretty adamant about things. So, I'm the type of writer director where producers know it's going to be a collaborative process. Right. I will collaborate and I can compromise. Absolutely. Because you have to, it's a business, but it's more of an equal yoking and because everybody brings something different to the table. Right. Because me as a writer director, I'm bringing that creative part to it. Whereas what I don't have that the producer does have is that actual knowledge of what kind of because when you really get a producer, especially on features, you always want to work with some. I would rather you take years to find the right producer for your project, because that's the person who goes to bat for you at the studio. And so if you have someone that's same page, same whatever, they're going to fight those battles for you at the studio, which is great because then I can focus on the creative. With television, it's actually a little different. It actually is more. Once the episode goes to production, Eric is the showrunner, is kind of that liaison as far as big decisions. But it really is kind of more in the production people, the directors, the producer, that team, that it's kind of in their hands and it's kind of their episode at that point.
Right. Well, I guess one thing I kind of wrapped my head around was, let's say you are on set or you get to go to set as a writer. And again, there's that collaboration there. So you want the directors and the actors to kind of interpret it a certain way and to bring it really to life. But also there's, I'm sure, moments where you're you're not hitting not hitting the beat right, but at least we're losing that narrative thread that was there present in the writing that will carry on to further episodes and even season arcs, X, Y, and Z. So how does that process work? If you let's say you have something like a suggestion and you're on the day on the set, but for me, it'd be man, there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen right now. How do you approach that?
There always are. And the thing is, when you get to set, it's the director's set. So that always really depends on the director, because some directors might be hey, writer, was that it? Like, but some directors
Okay.
might be like, no, it's fine. This is the way we're going to do it. So it really depends on the director that you get. Because some of them really do want to try to stick as close to the script as possible. Some of them are a little more just like, in everything. Some directors are a little more fluid with it. They're looking at the script more like a blueprint, and like skeleton versus, a Bible, So it really depends. It definitely depends.
Let's go back a little bit to the writer's room. I know you mentioned a minute ago about season long, you start top bottom, right? So you have the season arcs, like you have Barry's, Iris's, Caitlin's, Cisco's, all these guys. But then you have, that next year you may or may not know you're picked up for a season, but you probably at least plan on it, at least unless it's going to be the last season. So like you also have that in the back of your head too, like what's the potential thing down the corner? So how do you guys as writers think, typically, I guess for me, I'm always like the best idea should always win. But then also there's like an idea of, well, that could be a great next thing for next season.
Yeah.
So like, how do you guys break that? Like, and there's threads that can be picked up later, and maybe it's a loaded question, but
no, it's not. No. It's a good question. It's a great question because that happens all the time. Because at the beginning of our season, when we've got all these big grand ideas, we get down, when we get down to the nitty gritty, we might not have time, or maybe we end up having to actually shift in a different direction. Or maybe we're running out of money because the last episode was way more expensive than we thought it was going to be. So we have to like make sure the next episode's a little more. So we might like kick things down the line or kick
bottle
things
episode, right? Bottle episodes.
But they have their place. Like my first episode was a bottle episode that got me a job. So I'm like, I'm a fan of bottle episodes now.
There's some great bottle episodes out there. Community has some of the best bottle episodes.
Yeah, yeah.
good.
Specifically the ones called bottle episode or whatever. Yes.
Absolutely. But we do that all the time. And the other thing is, like, if we really do have a question about something of like, hey, we really want to do this, I am very fortunate to be in the type of writer's room where Eric's like, well, convince me that we should do it. And he like actually sits and he listens, and we might have our big pitch and our spiel to him, and he's either like yes or no, but he definitely does give us like the fair chance to like, no, like we're really passionate about this idea. Can we try it? And sometimes he'll say, try it. And if it doesn't work, I'm going to cut it. And that's just the way it is. So it's something I think also that TV writers, if you're going into television, that's always something to think about. It's like the first lesson for me to learn, because again, like I'm features at heart, right? Is when you write for television, you're writing the showrunner's show. You're not writing your show. So, going into it with that mindset at the beginning will set you up for a lot of success and less heartbreak and kind of punches to the soul when something doesn't work because the showrunner doesn't want it. It's his show.
right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, to your credit there, you're part of a larger group. You're a soldier, you're a cog in the machine, but you have that ability to have hey, that's me in that episode. That's the cool thing about
that's the
that.
awesome part. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to ask one little question. It's a kind of a sidestep here. I know The Flash and all these other CW shows are very visual effects heavy. So a lot of times they probably previs. I'm just guessing they probably previs these sequences, or they're working on these sequences way in advance. They know, hey, we're going to have Barry fight King Shark or something, or Godspeed, you said. And that sequence is being worked on. But then now you guys what's the process in terms of like, let's say you're still breaking the episode, and then this visual effect sequence is being worked on. Do those get too close to each other, or is it like, well, the sequence is already made and now we can't really change a beat or not because of the sequence being made?
Yeah, it actually usually happens the other way around. The production. So one of the really cool things about this show, again, a lot of rooms are different, but like one of the really cool things about this show is that, well, when we're physically together, we weren't last year, but when we're physically, all the Arrowverse production offices are in the same building. So like all the Flash production offices, post-production offices, we're on the same floor. They're like right down the hallway. So like, let's say we're breaking something and we know it's going to be VFX heavy. We're like, hey, Eric, can we like talk to you about this one thing? And he might just walk down the street and be like, hey guys, blah, blah. Because a lot of times when those things cost money, the good thing about being on a long running show is there are a lot of things, like you think about the lightning, you think about whatever, there's a lot of things that they already have builds for that they can just reuse in a different way. And that ends up happening. That actually ended up working out really well for my episode, because my last episode or my first episode with the Godspeed episode, because you know how they like ran up the building and everything. So like I wrote that like in a completely different way, but it ended up being too expensive. But what they were able to do is take a lot of things that they had pre-built so that the things that they had to add on later, they were able to do, they're able to afford it. So like the sequence still ended up looking pretty cool, even though if you think about it, we've definitely seen the run up the side of the building before. But the way they kind of tweaked it, the way they whatever, it still made it look very new and fresh. So there's a lot of collaboration across the halls going on with that kind of stuff.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's really it's really cool. Yeah. It's just kind of like problem solving. You know, that's kind of what and all filmmaking is, right? Like you get on a film set, all you're doing is problem solving over and over again. And whether it's the problem with the scene or whatever it is, but it's just it's awesome to, you know, hear about, because it seems like it's a very like group mentality. Like we're all in this together. We're all
100%.
We're trying to make the best episode possible with at the budget we need to meet, you know, meeting Eric's vision. And that's really cool. I mean, it's cool that, because I mean, I don't, maybe I'm just uninformed, but that doesn't seem like the most common thing necessarily in the industry to be that tightly. I mean, like, because the fact that you can walk down to Post Pro and say, you know, hey, can we afford this? You know what I mean? They can turn around and be like, no,
nope,
you know,
we absolutely
whatever.
cannot.
You know? It's like, oh, cool. All right. Like that actually sounds like places I've worked that are like, you know, not film related, but like, you know, like, oh, that's really
it's really
cool.
awesome. Like we're able to like do the episode, right? And then, you know, Eric then has those VFX meetings, which again, very uncommon that he does like bring in the writers in that whole process. A lot of times once the episode's written, like the showrunner is the one who's like just doing those meetings and stuff. But he has this mantra of I'm training future showrunners. So he has us into most of the, like me being able to go into VFX meetings and studio meetings and all these things as a staff writer, like that's unheard of. Like that, because staff writers are usually like seen and not heard, you know, because that's your job. But Eric's like, no, like you're getting paid money to write, so you're gonna like write. So like, you know, so but that's the really good thing, and that's actually a thing of, you know, a lot of it's an adjustment for some writers to kind of come in and you know have to quote unquote reconcile with the fact that like, oh, it's the showrunner show. But honestly, to tell you the truth, that makes everything so much easier, because we know whatever we need to do or whatever we're trying to do, we have a bridge and we have a liaison that can be that voice and that champion for us in the room. And so it's also very fortunate that this particular room has actually, like everyone in the room besides like the two of us new ones, they've been together since season 4. So everything is such like it's so tight knit and so like collaborative, and it really does feel like, hey, everything. So even if like an idea is like not taken, it's never like oh my god, that was dumb, you know. Well, unless it was just a dumb idea, but like, but it is very much like a no and here's why kind of thing. Like there's always like we're gonna make decisions together for the bigger picture, and everyone really feels that, like we feel like we're in that process. And the same thing with like VFX when they come back, and because after the episode's written, they come back with like the budget sheet of like, hey, with everything you want to do, this is how much it's going to cost. And so Eric and the writers, then we sit in. I mean, Eric leads those meetings, but it's great to be in there and learn, because I feel like I've learned so much about production overall just because of this particular showrunner that I have. He goes through that document and he sees the number and he's like, I know what number I'm trying to hit. And he goes line by line. It's like, don't want that. Yep. Keep that. Don't want that, until we get it to where we need it to be. And then, so it's collaborative from beginning to end.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. One thing I want to ask you, you said you talked about your hearts and features, at least your work, you have a few in development, X, Y, and Z. Writing a feature is much different than writing television, and even television for, let's say, cable TV versus like streaming. So you have like commercial breaks, example.
Yep.
Is it hard for you to make these different jumps in terms of writing back and forth to kind of wrap your head around the time frame and the style?
I would actually say no. And I would say no because, and this is something I've greatly encouraged, I have spent years just studying my tail off on how this works and what the format is for everything. Even if it's stuff I don't write, I know what the format is because I studied. And you don't have to go to school to do that. You can find, there's so many books and resources to do it. But because it's like turning a light switch off and on. Like, all right, I put my TV thing to the side. Now I'm going to a feature, and it's like in my reflexes. I know how to write a feature, right? So it really was doing that ahead of time, like due diligence of really studying and figuring out the craft and being comfortable with the craft. And it's definitely not hard. Like I might work on a feature and a TV thing, because sometimes I work on things just in bits and pieces. I might go from a feature in the morning and write on a TV episode in the afternoon, just because, I've got a handle on it. Because at the end of the day, it's all storytelling. The difference is, how do you format it?
Right. You mentioned the pandemic a few times, and I feel like anyone with any interview happening in the last year or so has to address it in some way. But me and Daniel, we've been, normally our studio's behind me right now. Normally we're here in here together, and we have a really sexy background, and we look good. We're lit very nice. Everything
To be
else.
fair, I still look good.
You still look good. You just got a new setup. You did.
There you go.
did, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go. But typically we're both on the screen together, and me and Daniel, obviously as creatives, we work really well together in the same room, and we can still accomplish things through text and through Zoom meetings like we're doing now. But there's, I feel like there's a magic that is lost. You can't pull that sticky note off the whiteboard, and you can't move it to a different act break or a different beat section. So can you talk to me a little bit about maybe your experience with going from in-person writing to now this, work from home situation?
Yeah. I mean, it worked. That's like what we're always like, it worked. We got to see the season of TV written. But you're right. Like it's so much different when you're able to, and it took a lot of adjustment on our parts in the beginning, just because, a lot of it's so fast paced that what you're doing, you're basically throwing spaghetti off the wall every day. And it's just bam, 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 thing after thing after thing. And so obviously, when you're in person, you're able to read people's body cues and learn when they are taking a pause and so that was definitely the biggest adjustment, just having, our pictures here on Zoom and trying to figure out, all right, when's a good place for me to step in and talk and everything. So that was really tough because, at the beginning it was definitely, we were still efficient, but like it was off because it was like we weren't used to it yet. But we ended up finding a flow. It was really great. Ended up learning how to take breaks during the day because, in a writer's room, like if you want to take a walk, you just get up and go, or go to the restroom, you just get up and go. But there's something about being in front of the computer that you just kind of sit here. And so we had to kind of teach ourselves to be like, I'm going to walk off for a second because my head is starting to hurt because I'm staring at this computer screen. So it was definitely hard, but we were still able to do it. Again, I think I'm extremely fortunate that I'm in a room where everyone knows each other so well already. Because the other thing is, and we have such Eric has that very mentality of I'm training future showrunners, and it's very apparent that he has that because, for example, his two number twos, now his number twos and his number three, his number twos are a writing team, but his number three, the co-EPs, they are also the same way as Eric because that's who trained them, and so, for example, in the room, because they know each other so well, if let's say things are kind of going and we're moving fast, one of the co-EPs will stop and be like, all right, let's pause. And then ask the lower level writers, is there anything you want to say? And so that actually helped the Zoom process as well. Especially because another one of our writers, she's a mid-level writer. She came from another show. And so she also did not know the flow of this room yet. So it was very good to have those upper levels who would kind of pause and be like, oh, hey, BT dubs, what else? You guys got something, or if we've unmuted. So and people started to have their little Zoom cues versus body language. Like for me, for example, now everyone in the room knows, if I actually unmute, I'm probably going to say something. But if I unmute and then I mute back, then obviously I was going to say something and I didn't want to jump into anybody, and somebody might stop and be like, say their idea. Oh, Jess, were you going to say something? You know what I mean? So we're starting to get our little virtual, which is hilarious. We're getting our virtual cues back, and I'm out here in LA where 72% of the whole state has at least one dose of the vaccine. So I'm I bet you 2 or 3 months into season 8, we're probably going to go back to the office.
Yeah.
Just when we're all getting our virtual cues down. So we'll see what happens there.
I would assume that you guys and even Eric are very much looking forward to the moment where you guys get back together and a lot of businesses and where we work and where Daniel works, they're kind of adapting this hybrid situation where you kind of work from home and you're also back in the office. I just assume that if you can, you will be in the writer's room. I feel like that's probably the best situation.
I think it's going to be really a matter of kind of what happened, because we lifted our mandates last Tuesday, and our season 8 room, starts next month. And so I think Eric's going to really I'm sure he's probably like really kind of sitting and paying attention and seeing what happens in the state before he starts to have those conversations with Warner Brothers of like, do we go hybrid? Do we go back? Like, what do we do? So I'm personally very curious to see what happens because I'm just ready to get back to work. So there's also that.
Well, speaking of work, one of my other questions I have for you is, you mentioned you're always writing, you're always kind of, sharpening that knife. I know a lot of, our listeners are from Arkansas and me and Daniel are both teachers at heart. And we know we've taught at UCA and, it's just, I think it's one of both of our passions. We always tell our students and just our friends and colleagues X, Y, and Z is that you have to work your ass off.
Yeah.
Can you talk to a little bit about, I've heard stories of people waking up at, they have to be on set as like a lower NPA or some type of a camera assistant or something. And they have to be there at, 6 in the morning and they're waking up at 4 in the morning to write before they're on set as a PA. Can you kind of talk about, almost like a call to action to some of these people who like, what does it take to become a writer in a writer's room?
It really does take that. It becomes, honestly, to be an artist at all, like even if you want to be a director or a writer or director of features or, writing in TV or directing TV, the main thing is you have to be a hustler, like, and you have to not have an ego. Like you definitely should have confidence and should know that you're talented. Like that's why you're trying to break into this industry, right? Because you think you're talented. So like, there is that line of or whatever, but like your ego's got to go because it doesn't matter if you've been making films for 20 some odd years, down the South, when you're out here in the game, like you are at the bottom of the totem pole. And guess what? That's actually okay. That's not an insult to you. That just means that if you find yourself at the bottom of the totem pole, that means your foot is in the door. And if your foot's in the door, you need to work your butt off to climb to where you're supposed to go, because 9 times out of 10, the people you meet, the people who can actually help you get there, that's all they want are people who are passionate about what they do and who work their butts off, because they work their butts off. The ones who are at the top, they still work their butts off. And so, it really is a lot about that. Like I've been on hiatus for a while, but, I still get up at the same time every day and I'm working on multiple projects. I use my time in between seasons to try to like work on other television things, because you're usually exclusive when you're writing on a show that you can't do other television things. So it's like, or I'm working on my features, or I shot a short last year because I know I'm going to be a director and I need to get like recent samples. And it's like stuff like that. You really have to think of yourself as a business. Like if you are losing money as a business, you don't just sit there and do nothing.
Right.
You figure out how to fix it and how to make yourself better. If you get a break as a business, you're probably going to want to come back better than you were last year. Like we have to think about ourselves like that, like, because we are. I mean, you think about it. When you start getting paid, you incorporate yourself into a business. It's a business. Like You're a business. And so that's the big thing, is like work your butt off. Always be writing. Always be writing is what I always say, is always be writing, work your butt off, and treat yourself like a business.
That's awesome. I know, and this may be a complicated question or even something you don't even want to get into too much, but me and Daniel are both big fans of the podcast Script Notes. And, John, Craig Mazin and John August. Yeah. And they're great. And they're a great resource for, just people in the industry, people who want to break in or just people who want to listen to for fun. And one thing they talk about a lot is the WGA rules and just getting paid and how that works in terms of working on a season of television versus, shorter form limited series on Netflix or X, Y, and Z. Can you kind of talk about, and again, you maybe can't get into this or even want to get into this. Can you talk about how, I know you're a staff writer on The Flash, but you're credited for typically written by one episode, right? Or is that maybe I'm wrong on this? Yeah.
So the way you're credited like as a staff writer. When you're a staff writer. So like last year, the episodes I did write, obviously it's like, teleplay by, there you go. Like I have an episode actually coming up on Tuesday that I have a story by credit. So it's like story by Jess Carson, written by Gabe Garza, Jonathan Butler, right? But on the other episodes of the season that you're not writing on, when you're a staff writer, you're not in like those opening credits, but you are in the back end credit together with we have 2 staff writers. So together with me and Emily. But this year, she and I both got our bumps up to story editor. So we'll be like, you'll see that story editor, like when those opening things are flashing by. But all of that is really determined. Like it's more with TV. That's the thing about TV. With TV, it's actually way more straightforward because I always tell people like TV is the corporate America of Hollywood just because it's the steadiest, quote unquote, you know?
Right.
And it's the more, that's where you're going to more likely kind of see the same things happening from show to show type of thing. So yeah, it usually is pretty general and uniform how like things are credited, you know, and the minimums are outlined. That's the other thing is like once you even write like something like a freelance episode like I did, which was one-off, that gave me enough to where I was able to join. I was like able to be a partial member of the WGA. But then when I got staffed, you're invited to become a full member of the WGA, and that like it really makes your life a lot easier because all the minimums are outlined right there. They have this huge document that the production companies have to have an agreement to, which, you know, that's the stuff they were talking about last year with our, you know, re-upping the production agreement. So the minimums are there. Like you can't get paid any less than that when you're a member, right. Like, you know, and all of that stuff. So all that's really lined out. The union really does, you know, look out for the members and everything. And you don't have to worry really about anything. Cause like for example, your insurance and everything, that doesn't come from the TV show, that comes from the union. So all of that stuff really does, it makes it a lot easier.
That's awesome. You know, I mean, I could go on forever and ever and ever. And I love, and again, there's a moment where I like stepped out of my own body and I was like, I just mentioned Godspeed to someone who's writing Godspeed. You know, I bought the first comic, or like, you know, I when New 52 started up, I was buying all that. And when Rebirth happened, I was buying all those issues every week. So I was there when Godspeed, like I have the issue Godspeed's first appearance. And then now I just like this weird, like I'm talking to someone who works on the Flash show. It's just this weird thing for me. It's very cool for us. And we really appreciate you being on.
Of course.
I do want to ask what's, you know, someone who writes for the Flash. I know me and Daniel, we watch everything. We watch, you know, Falcon Winter Soldier, Disney Plus. We're doing Loki later today. Oh. What do you watch? What do you watch in your spare time?
Whew, lots. Even more so now on hiatus and I have time to. I would say something that I definitely can rewatch and come back to all the time. It would be like what I feel like is the holy grail of grounded sci-fi, which is the Black Mirror. That is everything to me. But yeah, I'm watching all the Marvel shows now, which is great. I've actually been waiting on Loki since they announced these new shows. And like, I was even like, when I heard WandaVision was coming out first, I was like, I don't care. Then obviously that ended up surprising the heck out of everybody.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Loki right now is literally just everything for me. It's amazing.
Oh, I know.
So I'm watching that. I'm catching up on a lot of movies right now. I end up like, it's funny because I do watch things, you know, for pleasure, but I also watch things and I'm always like studying them. So like I'm watching a lot of, because the two main genres I write in, I will dabble in whatever, but the two main genres I dabble in are period pieces and grounded sci-fi. So I'm finding a lot of like, I always try to find like a lot of indie gems and things of that nature and prestige movies. Like I just recently rewatched Prospect with Pedro Pascal, which is just like, it's again, brilliant, like stuff like that. And yeah, on television, definitely into the Disney shows right now. I just had a full rewatch of the Harry Potter movie series. I had a full rewatch and I went chronologically. So again, when you have time on hiatus, especially during a pandemic where you're not going anywhere, you have a lot of time on your hands. Right. So there are days I actually chronologically, we watched all of Star Wars.
Yes.
Shows included. So I went through and watched everything chronologically and I did it because I'd actually never, and this was like early this year. I'd never watched Clone Wars ever because I'm a 90s kid. Yeah, I'm a 90s kid. And I was there from like the quote unquote fall of Disney when like Even Stevens and all those shows. And so when someone's like, Star Wars is going to be on Disney, I was like, they're going to ruin Star Wars. And I just never got around to it. But then I finally watched it and I was like, man, I'm partially glad I did wait because I never had to wait for an episode. So
are you watching the Bad Batch?
It's a good binge. It's a good binge.
I am watching the Bad Batch right now. I just started. I watched the first 2 episodes like last week. So, and I'm just like, I'm so into. I'm like a big Star Wars person. I'm a big Harry Potter person. So I'm like, you know, just giving myself some nostalgia lately. You know, watching some fun things and yeah, I watched like my straight up dramas. I rewatched. There's this movie called Belle that has Gugu and Bata Raw in it. She's Renslayer and Loki. It was her first movie. That she did called Belle. It's by one of my favorite directors. and I watched Daniel Oyelowo's new movie, The Waterman. His director debut was beautiful film. I watched Yellow Rose that has Eva Noblezada in, who's a big Broadway person. She did that's her first movie. Beautiful, beautiful movie. So yeah, I kind of watch like everything. That's great. I just love watching stuff.
That's awesome. No, we would love to. I mean, again, after we break here, me and Daniel are going to break down the first 2 episodes of Loki. We're a little behind on it. We're busy like everyone else, but we typically, we nerd out on stuff as we talk about it. But the other thing is we really do come at it from a writing and a filmmaking perspective. And to us, that's the fun part of watching this stuff. And, we have a thread with another friend of ours, and he's also a filmmaker, and we're all just sitting there like guessing what's going to happen, breaking it, character beats and all this other stuff. And if, in the future, if there's some show or something you're really passionate about, like something like Loki or something like that, we'd love to have you on and dissect those. It's what we do for fun. So it's what we do for fun.
Yeah. Same here. It's awesome.
That's awesome. Well, Daniel, how can our listeners write into us?
Listeners, you can write into us at bit.ly/241mail. There, let us know what you think of the Flash. I don't know. I'm trying to struggle to think of some follow-up questions to the episode, because you can ask questions to Jess and we might pass it on. Probably not, to be honest. And honestly, even if we did, I'm not sure she'd reply. She's busy, guys. So just whatever you want this week, just whatever floats your boat, bit.ly/241mail.
And if you can't hit us up at our Bitly, you can always hit us up in the comment section below. We're going to 2for1studios.com for all the 2for1 things. We have stuff come out like every day or something. It's crazy. I can't even keep up anymore. It's just so much going on. Last question for you, Jess. What do you have? I know you had your short film You come out. Was it last year you directed it? What else can you talk about that you're working on that's coming out soon, or what's the plan for you and festival circuit?
What should we be looking out for? What should we be looking out for from
I know probably the most immediate thing that's going to happen is I'm working on a short. It's actually going to be an animated short called Time that I'm working on because I'm just now linking up with my animator. She's in the UK, so linking up with her it's a little rough sometimes. But working on that, and then I have my debut feature Home. I'm hoping we get that going. Hopefully in the next year or so, knocking on wood. We've got a lead actress for that. We're out to like 1 or 2 other actresses that we're waiting on to see if they'll attach. And once they attach, we'll be able to go out wide with it. And then I'm also working on my own limited series. That'll be a little further down the line because I'm getting ready to go pencils up for the Flash again. So you gotta pause and developing on that. But it's definitely a gritty, dark pirate show, so I'm very excited about that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm watching
Hell yeah.
I'm not a huge anime guy, but I'm watching One Piece right now. So I'm in Pirate City right
One
now.
Piece
I
is
guess
amazing. Yeah, and I would say if I had to describe, okay, what would my show be like? It'd be, if I had to give you my comps for my show, I'd say like Black Sails meets Lovecraft meets Game of Thrones.
Oh, okay. I like all 3 of those.
Yeah,
I like the sound of that quite a lot.
Yeah. So that those the features, and then I have the adaptation. Those things are a little further because they're pretty early in development. But the most probably immediate thing will be this animated short that we're getting ready to do.
That's awesome. Well, I look forward to seeing all of it. And Jess, thank you so much for being on the show, and we really appreciate it. And I love talking about this kind of stuff. And again, I hope I was holding back questions for the Flash, but I'm sure I'll get all my answers pretty soon.
You will, and hey, it would have been all right anyway, because I've learned to perfect working on a fandom. I've learned to perfect my poker face. So
I'm sure.
All right. Well, my name is Donovan Thompson.
I'm Daniel Wingfield,
and I'm Jess Carson,
and we have spoken.